Jarred Kelenic is now an Atlanta Brave. We'll talk about it on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. Want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter, Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets after winning any $5 moneyline bet. It's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. The winter meetings are here. I figured I might go live tonight because I haven't gone live yet on the YouTube channel. So I thought, hey, maybe we'll go live, test some things out. But then I was like, what do we have to talk about that's worth going live? The Mets aren't making any signings today, so maybe we'll just record a normal show. And then the Atlanta Braves trade for Jarred Kelenic. I thought, you know what? Let's try this live thing out and talk about a trade that just frustrated me simply before I got into any of the details of it, because Jarred Kelenic is an Atlanta Brave. And for those of you who don't remember Jarred Kelenic, because hey, it's been some time since he was part of the New York Mets organization. He was traded infamously back in 2019 when the Mets were under the new GM-ship of Brodie Van Wagenen, and Jeff Wilpon was still the president of the New York Mets. And they decided to trade and get Robinson Cano and Edwin Diaz and just give up, the best prospect in their organization in Jarred Kelenic, as well as Justin Dunn. Now, also in that trade, Jay Bruce, Anthony Swarzak were in the deal. The Mets saved money in 2019 to acquire their closer and the guy that was supposed to bat third for them in Cano. Now, Cano clogged up their books until now, finally off the Mets books. Diaz has turned out to be a really great add, and I was finally not mad at the trade. I could point to the countless reasons why it was a bad trade for the Mets, but the net result was Edwin Diaz re-signed with the Mets. He is one of the best closers in baseball, and Jarred Kelenic never quite panned out for the Mariners, and Justin Dunn is, when he signs this offseason, going to be on maybe his fourth or fifth team. But now we come back full circle, and Jarred Kelenic is in the NL East with the Atlanta Braves in a trade that probably any team in baseball could have made. The Braves, they get Jarred Kelenic, Marco Gonzalez, and Evan White for prospect Cole Phillips and Jackson Kowar. Now, Kowar is a 27-year-old reliever with a career ERA over 9. So that's not really much of a piece. Cole Phillips is an arm that I'm sure the Mariners are excited about. Okay, he was drafted in the second round out of high school in 2022. He did Tommy John surgery, hasn't pitched yet. Might be great, but not necessarily some crazy top prospect. This is simply the Braves get Kelenic for eating the salaries of Marco Gonzalez and Evan White. Gonzalez, he might be a nice pitcher for the Braves this year, and honestly, because it's the Braves, I wouldn't be surprised if he became serviceable. But this past year, he had a nerve issue in his forearm, didn't pitch much, 50 innings, had a 5.22 ERA, and he's set to make $12.25 million in 2024. So the Mariners, after dumping Eugenio Suarez, have now dumped his salary, and also Evan White, who signed a pre-arb extension with the Mariners that never worked out, never panned out for them. It was a 6-year, $24 million deal that he's about to get paid on, $15 million over the next 2 seasons. Only carries a $4 million luxury tax hit, though, because of how that money was spread out over 6 years. And there's a $2 million buyout on a 2026 option. The funny thing about this trade is it's a deal the Mets almost could have and should have made. Yes, you'd be, getting a guy, Marco Gonzalez, that isn't much better than Joey Lucchesi in my eyes, that you'd have to pay more. But for the Mets, the team that has money, they could have swallowed that. They could have swallowed Evan White, and you would have got back Jarred Kelenic and had him be teammates with Edwin Diaz, and it would have been this weird full circle trade. But I understand that that's maybe not the most enticing move for them. They might have their eyes on Jung Hoo Lee, which we'll talk about in the next segment. But the Braves hop on this opportunity. They have Jarred Kelenic until 2029, 5 years of team control. And even though this guy has a career OPS in the 650s, I am sure, like most Mets fans are right now, that this guy's going to become a superstar. Just because it feels like it's going to happen. Now, more likely he becomes a serviceable outfielder for them. And for what they had to give up to get him, this is the perfect Braves trade. They're taking a bet on upside and their ability to tap in to that upside. If nothing else, Jarred Kelenic, I bet, is going to torment Mets pitching in particular. I don't know if he'll be an all-star. I don't know if he's going to become some great player, but could he be a starting level outfielder for the next 5 years? I think so. They needed a left fielder. They got their left fielder in Jarred Kelenic. It doesn't change the fortunes of the Mets season. Probably doesn't change the fortunes of the Braves season if we're being completely and utterly honest with ourselves. But Mets fans aren't going to see it that way. They're going to see Jarred Kelenic getting traded to the Atlanta Braves and think this guy is about to be a perennial all-star. And you know what? That 5 years of team control, Atlanta will probably sign him to an extension that will keep him a Brave forever because that's just how they do business. And he'll get an 8-year, $30 million deal, and he'll be like Ozzie Albies. And the torment continues of the Braves just being this franchise that is very hard to catch because Alex Anthopoulos is pretty good at his job. But you know what? I trust David Stearns. I do. And I trust that the Mets weren't going to make this trade because there's better moves to be made. And that's what we're going to talk about next. Jung Hoo Lee, the Mets are interested, and I think that is going to fit their team a whole lot better if they can pull off that deal. We'll talk about the interest in just a minute here. Before we do, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Score this NFL season with FanDuel. This is where you can place a $5 moneyline bet. And if you win, you get $150 in bonus bets. This is why they are the number one sportsbook. And if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. You got the NFL season, college football with their playoffs coming up, and the NBA in-season tournament. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including the spread, player props, over-unders, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner, the NFL. All right, I see some of you are watching. I will look at those comments and answer some questions in the final segment, but I want to talk first about Jung Hoo Lee. So the Mets have shown some interest, apparently, in Jung Hoo Lee. I spoke about him last week where I was breaking down all of the candidates in the international market that the Mets could sign this year. And Jung Hoo Lee is a very interesting free agent. He's 25 years old. He did have an ankle injury this past year that limited his season, but for his career in the KBO, he's gotten on base over a 400 clip. He's been a 340 hitter. He's won 5 Golden Gloves. Obviously, the KBO is not Major League Baseball, but if you just picture what he would look like on the Mets next year, this makes a lot of sense. Okay, I've talked a lot this offseason about how the Mets don't necessarily have to make moves when it comes to their position players, that they have enough, and it's more important to focus on the pitching. Yes, this roster needs improvements, but the pitching is not good enough. If they don't address that first, this team's going nowhere. But Jung Hoo Lee is a piece that you look at, and it's almost like paying for a prospect. He's still that young. He's not going to cost a ton. He's going to make a pretty good contract, but I don't think he's going to get to 9 figures. I really don't. We'll see, but I don't believe it gets that far. And he fills a need. The Mets don't have a ton of outfield prospects in the future. So if you think about a 5-year deal, he not only fits, helping them next year, but a longer window as well. And I honestly look at it as, if they do end up signing Lee, or if they get another outfielder, let's say it's Michael A. Taylor, who they're also showing some interest in, I think it shows you the concern regarding Starling Marte, right? Because Starling Marte this past season, coming off the double groin surgery, was not himself compared to 2022. He looked awful. And, if you try to project this next upcoming year, how can you be sure that he's going to be available and effective out in right field? Jung Hoo Lee has a much better arm than Brandon Nimmo. So if they sign Lee, I think you'd put him in right, you keep Nimmo in center, and Starling Marte would be, your left fielder if he's healthy, but you have DJ Stewart to provide some insurance there. It would significantly improve the Mets' outfield defense, and David Stearns is really concerned about defense. So I think that's where this interest comes from. I don't know how much the market's going to develop on Lee or how many teams are going to be in the mix for him, but he's definitely, if you look at this position player crop in free agency, if there's one guy to give a multi-year deal to, it probably is Jung Hoo Lee. I'm trying to think of another viable free agent to target on a multi-year deal, and I really don't find any. I mean, yeah, the Mets could get Teoscar Hernandez, but that's not going to help your defense. And, it's just going to be another guy that maybe needs to take some DH at bats. And I think the Mets might want to keep that spot a little bit more open for the future. So again, I'm trying to look through this class, and you can say, hey, the Mets should get Cody Bellinger. I don't think they want to put that much money in a Cody Bellinger. And Lee positionally fits. So I think this would be a really smart signing. Obviously, it depends on what the cost is. Once we know what that contract is, we'll understand how good of a deal it really would be. But I'm definitely all in on the idea of Jung Hoo Lee. I think if you added him, you pair him with Nimmo atop the lineup as well, gives you multiple on-base guys. It's a team that still lacks some power. I guess that'd be my one concern about it. So I think you'd really be banking on the power of, Mark Vientos, potentially Francisco Alvarez, some of those guys that aren't quite as proven. And I don't know where you would get that additional power, because all of a sudden your outfield feels pretty full. Maybe it is upgrading that DH spot as well. I guess that would be the path to it. If you were clearing Vientos and signing somebody just to be the DH and give you some extra home run pop. But I guess that's the one place where I'd be concerned. And that's also where I go all the way back to the Joey Wendell signing, the only position player they've added so far. And I still hate that signing because it's taking a roster spot. And I still felt then, and as I do now, that Ronnie Mauricio could serve most of the role that Wendell is brought here to play, which is, being a guy that can play second, short, and third. Now, Wendell will do all that better than Ronnie Mauricio, but not going to hit. And so, I don't know. The picture of what the Mets are trying to accomplish this offseason, it's still pretty blurry. We know they're going after pitching. Now we hear the interest in Lee. It seems like they want to improve their defense. If you want to improve your defense, how are you feeling about Beatty and Mauricio at third? That's something we'll have to learn. They've done a lot of, dumpster diving so far to, I guess, maybe not put it in the kindest terms, but they've been adding, minor league signings. Nothing wrong with that. Get some guys that have good sliders that maybe pan out in your bullpen, when you try them out in spring training. But overall, there has yet to be a move that really inspires a ton of confidence. Luis Severino's not going to get the job done there after the season he just had. It might be a good signing, but for now, we're still waiting to see what happens. There's the Yoshinobu Yamamoto pursuit. There's potentially Jordan Montgomery. There's all those rumors that are out there. But until the Mets make their first move, we're all just kind of left waiting heading into winter meetings. The idea of Jung Hoo Lee is the best one I've heard lately outside of the starting pitching market. I think it makes a lot of sense long term, but I would be very curious what would have to come beyond that to make this team complete and make sense. Because yes, this services the defense, but if you go into next year and you're expecting Pete Alonso, Francisco Lindor, and Francisco Alvarez to be the three real power threats in your lineup that you can count on, I still think you're missing a little something. Although maybe pitching and defense is enough, and if they improve in those areas, maybe the Mets can find their way to some success. Anyway, in the last segment, I want to take some of your questions, so I'm going to pause a bit on the live stream to gather some of those, and then I also want to talk about how Scott Boras is controlling this market because He's got a lot of top free agents, so I'll touch on that as well. We'll get to all of it after word from our sponsors and a quick minute for me to gather your questions here on the live stream. All right, so I pulled a couple of questions here from those watching on YouTube that we'll get to. Also, speaking of questions, if you ever want to ask me anything about what's going on in the offseason, or if you want to get an update about anything going on with the hot stove, become a Locked On Mets insider. You can find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, we got two questions here from the live stream audience. One is, why didn't Sturz make this move? I did censor that a bit. There was a little more frustration behind the question, but I figured we'd get the essence of it by simply that. Why didn't Stearns make the move to acquire Jarred Kelenic? Ultimately, the Mets already have a lot of dead money on their books, and Marco Gonzalez and Evan White, who the Braves are acquiring in this trade, are dead money. Now, why the Mariners are clearing their books, people are going to guess it's for Shohei Ohtani, and if it is, man, that'd be a crazy twist of this offseason. But regardless of what's going on there in Seattle, for the Mets to get a pitcher in Gonzalez that isn't much better than what you already have at the price tag, not really worth it. Evan White is just a piece that I don't even know if he'd be playable on the Mets. He's going to make a sizable amount of money. And Jarred Kelenic, while I think there is still upside there, his OPS was closer to 750 than his career 650 mark this past season. I still don't know for sure if he comes to the Mets and becomes awesome. Now, going to Atlanta, where they've gotten the most out of talent in a small ballpark, I do think he's going to be really good. I don't know what that happens for the Mets. So as much as I'm frustrated by the fact that he's a Brave, and as much as I look at this and say the Mets could have done it, if they end up signing Jung Hoo Lee in a couple of days, they did the right thing. Now, another question we got here. Who would you want from the free agent DH position as an upgrade? There's two guys that jump out. One, JD Martinez. Okay. He's the best DH outside of Shohei Ohtani available. Another guy, if it was a 1-year deal, Jorge Soler, I just think he's going to get more years than that. But if you can sort of overpay Soler on a 1-year deal, I mean, you want home run power, Jorge Soler would provide that. I'm just thinking at his age, he's going to try to cash in on a 3 or a 4-year deal, get the guaranteed security coming off his best season since he hit all those home runs in the Braves World Series run in 2021. I think that it's going to be too many years. So JD Martinez is probably the best DH available on a 1-year. Although if Ohtani doesn't end up with the Dodgers, I think he circles back and ends up back in LA. The guy that I've talked about this offseason at DH that makes a ton of sense to me is Justin Turner. We're talking reunions with the Mets. This is one that would make some sense because he would be your opening day DH for sure. But if Mauricio and Beatty didn't pan out at third base, and let's just say Mark Vientos was showing more with the bat, you could DH Vientos and put Justin Turner at third. So I think it's got to be a 1-year deal at the DH spot. We still don't know what's going to happen with Juan Soto. I don't think the Mets are going to trade for him by any stretch with everything we've heard this offseason. But let's just say the Blue Jays acquire Juan Soto. Is he going to re-sign there? I think there's a chance that that's a rental move. And if Juan Soto hits the market next year, you want to keep that possibility to have Soto as your DH for a decade. Obviously, he plays some corner outfield as well, but I don't think you want to put long-term money on the books at DH. So it's got to be a 1-year deal. I don't think Soler takes a 1 year. I think Martinez would be a really nice add, but I don't know if he's coming to the Mets. Justin Turner, because of his ability to play third base as well, I think that's my favorite of the upgrades the Mets could get in free agency at DH. But I want to close the show discussing the monopoly that Scott Boras has on this free agent class. This is something that I actually had one of my writers over at justbaseball.com do an article on this past week, and I did a little video for Just Baseball as well that should go up tomorrow or Tuesday about it, but it's still worth talking about here as well because Scott Boras is going to control the pace of the winter meetings. His clients, he has 5 of our top 10 free agents at justbaseball.com and 7 of our top 15. He's got Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery in the starting pitching market. He's got Cody Bellinger and Jung Hoo Lee, guy we've been talking about today, when it comes to center fielders. He's got Matt Chapman, the top third baseman, Rhys Hoskins, the top first baseman, JD Martinez, the top DH outside of Ohtani. And there's one more that I'm blanking on right now. Regardless, he controls a lot of these different markets. That might have actually been it. Oh, Cody Bellinger. I said Bellinger? I don't know if I did. Bellinger is the other Boras client. So he controls the center field market, right? Cody Bellinger, is he going to sign at the winter meetings? Well, depends on what happens with Shohei Ohtani. If Ohtani ends up signing with the Dodgers and the Giants all of a sudden have a lot of money to spend, well, then maybe Bellinger goes. I could see them holding back on Bellinger, and then maybe that slows the entire outfield market. Maybe he waits for Bellinger to sign before he, has Jung Hoo Lee get his deal. He's going to get posted on Monday, Lee is, so they have 45 days to get a deal done. I don't know. I don't know how that's going to be held up. The starting pitching market is one that, of course, as Mets fans, we are really looking into right now, and Yoshinobu Yamamoto is still the Mets' top target. Everyone is reporting it. The Mets probably are the team that submits the highest offer. Yamamoto is not going to come back to the States until after the winter meetings. That was a power move for him being the top free agent starting pitcher, and it's almost a shot fired directly at Scott Boras. What are you going to do, Scott? Are you going to rush the market now, get Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery signed, and then clear out a runway for Yoshinobu Yamamoto with all the teams that are left in the bidding to get his mega contract? Do you not care at all? Or do you actually want to wait? Do you want to hold Blake Snell out until Yamamoto signs, because whoever he doesn't sign with might actually jump in and sign Blake Snell? I think if I had to guess right now, this is just what my gut's telling me. I feel like Jordan Montgomery signs, Blake Snell does not. Blake Snell, they're going to slow play this thing. They're going to leave him. It might even be a Bryce Harper-esque free agent waiting period for him. They're going to wait till everyone signs, and then there's going to be a team that'll eventually give him a 6-year deal where he's going to make over $30 million a year, and they're going to be wincing as they put that contract in front of them. That's what I think is going to happen there. But again, Scott Boras is controlling that market in a lot of ways, and that holds up guys like Eduardo Rodriguez. We saw some report, I think it was the USA Today this weekend. I only saw it on Twitter, but they put something out about how Eduardo Rodriguez was about to sign, and then the Mets showed interest, and then he pulled back. And now he's kind of waiting on the Mets, who probably favor Jordan Montgomery or even Shota Imanaga to Eduardo Rodriguez. But if they miss out on those guys, they might pay Erod more than anyone else. So that's interesting to watch. And again, that speaks to how the market can get held up by these few free agents that are the best in this class. Scott Boras has a lot of power in this, and it's just going to be interesting because if teams are going to meet his asking price, we're going to see a really exciting winter meetings. If they don't meet his asking price on these free agents, and he decides to sit on his hands, that might hold up the rest of the market. And it might be one of those winter meetings where we are, coming up on Wednesday night, Thursday morning, and not much has happened and fans are just left disappointed. So I'm really interested to see how all this ends up shaking out. I'll be obviously monitoring all the Mets stuff, and I will be hopping on these live streams when big news happens for the Mets throughout. So this was my little first test run of it, and because it is, and there are almost 100 of you watching, and it's almost midnight, I'm going to take a minute here as I close the show for the rest of our listeners for tomorrow that'll be tuning in to take any remaining questions left, and then we'll wait to see what'll happen next. So give me a minute to kind of gather what everyone said. All right. So looking over some of these questions we got here, one of them that's interesting. It would seem Stearns, as the new GM, would be looking to unload a Jeff McNeil and Starling Marte in a package for pitching, maybe starting pitching, bad high contracts for the trade. I think that Starling Marte is going to be tough to move. You're going to eat a lot of money. I guess if you could eat money on this year and get someone to take more money on the second year of the deal, maybe. The Mets are probably best served sort of just seeing what happens with Marte this year. Honestly, I think the Jung Hoo Lee signing, which I should have mentioned before, it could also set up Marte to be more of a DH. That can, get him off his legs a bit, and maybe you get some more offensive value from Marte in that instance. That's, I guess, the best that I can do there. I just don't think that they're going to actually be able to deal him. Dealing Jeff McNeil, yes, in some respects, I think he's attractive. He's got a good contract, but I think that contract serves the Mets more on their roster than in a trade, because I don't think they'll get a haul for McNeil. Someone asked if, how far the Mets should go in Montgomery. We got 7 years, $209 million. I think the guy might make $25 million a year. So, short math on that, 7 years. I don't think he pushes 200. I would say $25 million a year is probably the most I would go on Montgomery. Maybe 5 years would be it. So I guess that's as far as I would go. So that 5 for 125. It's the best I would do on Jordan Montgomery. I have another comment here about Hunter Renfroe as a DH option. Plus, he has an incredible arm. Yeah, Hunter Renfroe would not be bad. I think the problem with Renfroe is you're not going to stick him out in center field. So while it's nice in the theory, because you have DJ Stewart, because you have Starling Marte still, I think they're going to try. If they do add an outfield, I think it's someone that can play center. So when it comes to the outfield market, the free agents I'd be looking at, it's now Jung Hoo Lee, which I obviously spent a lot of time today discussing. Michael A. Taylor, I think, is the other one because there's already been some rumored interest. The guy hit over 20 home runs this year with the Twins. He is like the most underrated and best fourth outfielder in baseball, where he can start if you need him to. So if Starling Marte can't play this year, and all of a sudden Michael A. Taylor is your starting right fielder, you got Nimmo, you got Stewart in left, like the Mets would be okay. So I really like Michael A. Taylor. Harrison Bader is in this market. I don't think he signs with the Mets. I think he wants to go somewhere where he's going to get the chance to play every day, and I don't think the Mets would give him that opportunity from the jump. Kevin Kiermaier's out there. I think he's probably more of a fit for the Yankees with their short porch and his left-handed swing. He might want to win too, and maybe the Yankees give you a better pathway to do that. Adam Duvall, if you're thinking about Hunter Renfroe, like Adam Duvall makes more sense because he can play center field. And he showed more at the bat recently. Had a good year with Boston despite the injuries, which are always present in my eyes when it comes to Duvall. But if you signed him and you sort of have him and DJ Stewart fighting her outfield reps out in left field. I think that could make some sense for the Mets. But still, from what we learned today, Jung Hoo Lee is the best outfielder I think that they would add this offseason. Anyway, that's most of the comments we got here. So that'll be all for this live stream. Appreciate all of you for tuning in, and make sure you keep an eye out as we will do more of these throughout the winter meetings, hopefully, because the Mets are going to make some moves. Let's see who they end up signing. David Stearns is on the clock now. We'll see what he can do. Mets fans are not going to be happy if the Mets come up completely empty, and by this time on Thursday, it's just Joey Wendell and Luis Severino and a bunch of minor league pickups for the bullpen. So we'll see what happens.